friends, I'm here today to talk to you about some series that I don't know that I will ever finish. I have a stack of books next to me of a series that I read the first book, maybe even the first two, but I'm just not sure that I'll ever finish them. And I would love your opinion if there's any of these that you think I should definitely continue. I feel like I know some of the ones that y'all are going to tell me I need to keep going with. We'll see. All right, so I'm gonna start with the least likely to continue and go to the most likely to continue. I didn't include any series where I DNF'd the first book because I feel like that's just kind of obvious. There are also, I'm sure, some that I started and have forgotten about, or that I started when I was younger and will probably never finish, but these are the ones I have either on my shelf right now or that I listened to recently on audiobook, kind of still on my mind. Let's start with the ones I am least likely to continue on. In fact, I am sure that I will not be continuing on with these few. First one is Roar. I got this book probably when it came out and just recently finally picked it up. It's kind of a YA fantasy book, and I think I'm actually going to be unhauling it. I loved the magic system in this. It's a very elemental based magic system where the storms are sent by angry gods, and you can reach into a storm and grab the heart of the storm, and that gives you power over that type of storm. Some people are born with the ability to use those hearts. Some people are not. So if you're in the royal bloodline, you're supposed to be able to use the hearts of these storms that have passed down from generation to generation. But this princess cannot. None of the hearts speak to her. She's about to have to take over as queen, and she can't use the magic of the land. But she hears about someone who is not supposed to be able to have used the magic, but caught one of these hearts anyway and kind of bent it to their will. So I really loved the magic system, but there is a love triangle in this, and both of them men are super possessive, and it was very insta-love. It was kind of like I looked at her and I knew she was going to be mine, and I was going to protect her from everything no matter what. And she just kind of went along with it and accepted it, and I did not enjoy that aspect of it. And that kind of outweighed the things I did like, unfortunately. So I am going to be unhauling this book. I think there are plenty of people that will probably enjoy it. Okay, this next one is totally different. This is The Forgetting. I got it around the same time that I got this other one, but I really liked this book. It was really well done. It has a very cool premise. I can't remember if it's once a year or once every few years, a certain type of leaf falls and they have a festival and everybody forgets everything. So you have to keep a book on you that is basically like your life story, so that when the forgetting happens, you know who you are, who the people around you are, and you follow a girl who does not actually forget. Her father actually wrote them out of his book. At one of the forgettings, they woke up, her sister and her mother, and none of them knew who her father was, but she still knew. And so there's a lot of mystery. There's a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of romance, and I really liked this book, so I'm keeping it on my shelf. I didn't know this was a series, and honestly, it felt like a really good standalone. And so I realized it was a series, looked at the premise of book 2, and it's about someone else coming to this world, and there's a little bit of backstory to that I'm not going to give away. I just felt like I didn't really need any more of this story. It was a good standalone. I loved it, and I don't want to keep reading. I don't know if that makes sense or if you've ever had that feeling before, but this was a good open and shut book for me, and I don't need a book 2 that's like semi-unrelated, if that makes sense. Okay, the next one is The Poppy War. I was so excited to pick this up because I had heard, amazing things. And I will say the writing in this was wonderful. The story was intriguing. It was just too brutal for me. I did not like the path the characters were taking by the end. I know it follows some historical context, and that's part of why it is as brutal as it is, but I just, by the end of it, did not feel like I was having a good reading experience. And I can handle some brutal stories, but I just think there wasn't enough in this to counterbalance that feeling, especially when I didn't like the paths that the characters were taking at the end of this. And so, again, keeping it on my shelf, but not going to continue. The next one is Dawn by Octavia E. Butler. I recently picked this up with a book club group, and it was such a weird experience. I really have a lot of respect for this book. I really liked the writing style. Humans have destroyed Earth and through just horribleness. And so these alien species come and they are going to save some humans and replant them in hundreds and hundreds of years later after they've kind of helped Earth kind of rebuild itself a little bit. But the contingency is that the aliens are gonna mutually benefit from this. And it was a good premise. It was just so unsettling. I just felt myself kind of like not cringing, but just like hunching my shoulders almost through the whole thing. And so that made me feel like it was really well done, just not for me. It was not like a mystery where I'm like tense because I want to know what's going to happen next. I was tense because I did not like what was happening. And I could understand the rationale behind what was happening, but it was hard for my brain to accept. It was really good sci-fi, really good like futuristic conflict and big questions of, what is humanity going to look like in the future? While I did appreciate and respect this book, I didn't like it. All right. Here's the next one, The False Prince. I read this maybe a year and a half ago. It is about 4 boys who are trying to pretend to be the next prince because that prince has died and no one knows that he's died. I usually really love a good royal story, and I didn't hate this book, but I felt like the characters, I struggled to connect with the characters. They all felt like they were trying to be a little bit too gruff, a little bit too much bravado. It just felt a little bit abrasive almost all the time. And it was also a lot of male characters, and the female characters were just kind of there. There was a twist at the end, but I honestly don't know where book 2 would even go. The more I talk about it, I might end up unhauling this. It was fine, but it just didn't make me want to go further. Okay, next up is The Graces. This is such a beautiful cover, so I am obviously keeping this book. I liked this book. It was, again, the way the characters were headed by the end of the book was not something I was okay with. It follows a girl, River, who gets caught up with this family of 3 siblings that have magic. They're very cool. They're very like chic. They're the most popular kids at school, and they kind of take her under her wing, and she will do anything to be part of their family, be part of that magic. And some of the things she does is not okay. I really wanted her to kind of step into her own by the end of the book, and instead she is like on a path of dark vengeance. Yeah, it felt like the opposite trajectory of a good character arc. Like, she was making worse and worse decisions. The thing she was doing was getting worse and worse. So I just don't have any investment in book 2 or any faith that the character can turn it around in book 2. I did recently read Blood Heir. This had a little bit of Anastasia vibes with some blood magic and a very sassy thief, a little bit of romance. I didn't really like the main character very much. She has blood magic, so she can do some pretty awful things. And she went back and forth between like, I'm a monster, I shouldn't be doing these things, and just gonna rip through people. And it felt a little bit jarring at times, and it made it harder to buy into that character and defend that character and want that character to succeed. I liked her brother more than her. And so she's trying to kind of get her throne back, and that continues on in book 2 and book 3, I'm sure. I didn't invest in the story enough. I wouldn't be mad about continuing this. There are other things I want to read more. So if I happen to pick up book 2, I don't think I would be disinterested, but I just don't have incentive to pick it up ahead of things like Wheel of Time, Brandon Sanderson, and those kinds of things, which makes me feel like by the time I would get to it, I'll have forgotten everything. Everything past this point are books I may still end up picking up. I don't know. I would probably read these, but I have learned that I am always going to have things I want to read, and I can't feel obligated to continue a series that I was giving 3 stars and was pretty mediocre about. There are so many books to read, so you got to make some hard decisions. So, The Bells. The Bells, this is about magic to change people's appearance. There's competitions between the Bells to become the kind of appearance, I forget what it's called, the person who does some makeup and appearance for the royal family and nobles. And so our main character competes and almost gets that like top spot, but gets beat out by her rival. Only to find out that things at the palace are not what they seem. And eventually she does get drawn there and is asked to do some pretty awful things. I was intrigued by this. I really liked the magic. It was a little bit too vague at times. The consequences didn't seem like enough to warrant the fear that this main character was feeling. So again, I think I ended up giving this like a 3.5 star. It was on my list to finish originally because I thought it was a duology, but I think it's a trilogy, and that makes me a little bit less likely to pick it up for some reason. Okay, next up is Hyperion. I read this on Kindle this year, and I didn't really know what to expect. I just knew it was a big classic sci-fi. The writing style is very flowery, I would say. It was hard for me to follow, and the end of book 1 was not an ending, it was like a part 1, which I didn't know. You're basically getting kind of the story of 6 characters as they're traveling, and I liked some of their individual stories, and then other individual stories I did not like at all, and it felt like it was a slog a little bit to get through. And then you also get the story, the narrative of them traveling, and there's some like back and forth time-wise, which made it hard for me to follow. I kept getting confused about where we were at in the timeline and where each person's story fit in the timeline, and so I just was not enjoying it by the end. I felt like I was making myself finish this book and then got to the end and it wasn't an ending, which made it even more disappointing. So I might finish this because it is such a classic and it wasn't a complete story, but I think I'm just a little bit hesitant because it did kind of put me in a reading slump the first time. So I don't know if I want to put myself through that again. Okay, next up I have Children of Blood and Bone. I know I read this. I remember thinking it was okay, but I cannot remember any of it right now. I was looking through this and I was trying to flip through pages. I don't remember any of the characters. I remember there being a romance that I was iffy about, and that was it. I just don't remember anything about it, and that makes me feel like if I want to continue on, I would have to reread this. If I don't remember it, maybe that's a sign that I should just let it go. For one of my classics, I recently read Magician's Apprentice, which is a part of a duology, and then there's some follow-up books that have to do with other characters. This is one of those like classic fantasy books. It had a very like trope heavy feel because it is such a classic. There was an old wizard, there was a chosen one, there was an invasion by a species that came from a different dimension. It was very run of the mill, and usually that doesn't bother me. I get very comforted in that, but I think it's old enough that the writing style was not quite as engaging as what I'm used to in those comfort fantasy reads, where I don't mind that this is a very standard fantasy. Kind of felt like by the time I put it down, it was immediately out of my mind. I would be okay with finishing again the second one, but I certainly don't think I would continue on with like the other characters in this world or his adventures years and years later. Okay, up next I have Young Elise. I picked this up because I love Marie Lu as an author. She wrote the Legend, Champion, Prodigy trilogy that I just adore, and I can reread Legend any time of the day. So I picked this up and I read it within the last year and realized that I had already read it before. I vaguely knew what was going to happen. I realized that I was rereading this and just had totally forgotten that I'd already read it once, which does not bode well for continuing on with the series. It's about a girl who has magic that people consider very taboo and dark magic, and she can't control it very well so she accidentally hurts people with it. So she runs off and kind of joins this band, and she's betrayed. She betrays people, and by the end, again, she wants revenge. She wants just kind of to bring the world down. I didn't like the main character in this. She's very bratty almost, and I also felt like her powers were seen as this huge big bad thing, and it never really felt that way. It never felt like she was as dangerous as she was said to be. And so, having read it now twice, just don't really know that I need to continue on with it. Okay, Zero Repeat Forever. This is a dystopian where the world is invaded by these robot-ish type people. They have a ranking system, and one of the girls that survives and is like hiding out in a camp meets one of the robots. I don't think he's a robot, one of the aliens maybe, and he's separated from his unit, and he should kill her. He knows he should kill her, but he doesn't. And they both kind of struggle with each other for a bit. She's held prisoner, but not held prisoner. They slowly form a bond. If they find out that he's been keeping her alive, he's gonna be in trouble and she's gonna be in trouble. And so they end up kind of working together to try and get her back to her friend group. I really loved the personality of the alien and the friendship and romance that came between them. But like the rest of it, I didn't care about. So I can't continue to read on just because of a romance subplot, or I can, but again, will I choose book 2 of this over Brandon Sanderson or Discworld? No. So I may eventually get to this, but the chances are so unlikely because I have so many other things that I just need to prioritize. I would still honestly kind of recommend this book if you like YA dystopians in that Hunger Game era, because it does have that feel. At least book 1 does. I can't vouch for anything past that. All right, here are some of the ones where y'all are going to start giving me a little bit of flack, because I have Malice next on the list. This is like a book 2 darling. Everybody loves this. I didn't dislike it, but there were so many male characters that all felt the same. I think I read this also like right after A Wheel of Time, and so I was just kind of done with that epic grand scale when I read this. It wasn't maybe, I didn't give it a fair chance, I'll say in that regard, but I kept getting the characters confused in this because they were all young teenage boys that were going through similar experiences, and I just could not keep them straight. And by the end, I was so frustrated with the lack of female characters in this and the way all of them felt so similar that I just had no interest in picking up book 2. And then I saw the size of the following books, and I was even less incentivized because I don't know that I can invest that much time into something I'm uncertain about when there are so many big chunky books that follow. Girls of Paper and Fire is next. I really enjoyed this book. It is about a girl who is kind of in the running to be the king's mistress, the king's consort, and she doesn't want to be. She doesn't really have a choice. I really liked the dynamic between all the girls and the royalty and kind of courtly aspects of this, but I heard everyone say that book 2 did not hold up, went in a weird direction, was not that good. And so enjoying this book, it wasn't a 5-star for me, but then to hear that book 2 was such a disappointment to so many people, I never picked it up. And I just don't know that I want to pick up a book where so many people didn't like it. I can end having enjoyed book 1 and just end on happy memories. All right, I have Empire of a Vampire up next. I really liked this book. I listened to it on audiobook, and I really liked the characters. I really liked the journey. It was just so freaking slow, and I felt like it took forever. And maybe it was because it was the audiobook, but it was just a slog. Like, I enjoyed it every time I picked it up, but I felt like I was reading it for years and years. And so I would love to know more of the story, but I feel like that first book should have been maybe 3 books. I don't know that I can do that again. It just was such a long book, and the plot was very thin. It was all an enjoyable read. I just kept finding myself saying, this has got to be done soon. And then I'd look and there'd be like 5 more hours. And they were an enjoyable 5 more hours, but it was just too long. It was just too long. And I don't want to do it again. Renegades is up next. This is by Marissa Meyer, who also wrote The Lunar Chronicles, which I love. Again, kind of like Marie Lu, I picked this up because I love the author. And it wasn't a bad premise. It was about the daughter of a supervillain and the son of a superhero and how their lives have been impacted by that. And the daughter ends up kind of tricking her way into the superhero group so she can, at first, obviously break them from within. But she slowly starts to question the villainous world she was raised in. She slowly starts to kind of enjoy the company that she's keeping. I really liked the superpowers that they all have. So I did enjoy reading this. That's probably why it's up on towards the top of this list. It just didn't quite stick with me as much as some of the series that I've been actively working to finish. It's more a product of, do I have time for this? Will I make time for this? Another one y'all are gonna come at me for, Jade City. I listened to Jade City on audiobook and I liked it, but again, it felt too long. It's a very political series, and like, political books are not really in my wheelhouse. I don't mind them, but they aren't something I gravitate towards. And so I had planned on continuing this, especially because I keep hearing how good the series is, but I keep just choosing other things first. And now that it's probably been a few years since I've read book 1, I would have to reread it at this point because it didn't, like, I remember the characters, I remember the premise, but I don't remember the specifics. And I feel like in a political book, you really need to remember the specifics. So it is the number 2 spot. I will maybe eventually get to it, but if you knew the amount of series I'm in the middle of, and you know how slow I read the series I'm actively working on, then you know that it is still very unlikely that I'll ever actually finish and get to this. The number 1 spot is kind of silly because book 1 was a 5-star read for me. I devoured it. And then I heard such horrible things about book 2. It was rushed, it had grammatical errors, it didn't feel like it fit the characters, and that is Fourth Wing. I loved this book. It is totally, like, firmly in my genre wheelhouse. I love the romance, I love the dragons, I love the competition. It was amazing. And so when book 2 came out, I was like, ooh, yes, definitely gonna be picking this up. And then I just heard such bad things. It sounds like it was just the author was really pushed to release this maybe before it was ready. My plan at the moment is to see what happens when book 3 and book 4 come out, because this is supposed to be a 5-book series, according to the author. So I'm hoping that book 3 will come out and people will say, okay, they fixed it. It's better, it's back on track, book 4 is solid. And so I'll know that it was just a middle book slump. However, if book 3 comes out and they're like, this is the same issue, it feels rushed, it feels not true to book 1, or it's just a bunch of characters complaining or whatever it may be. If book 3 and 4 are like book 1, we'll keep going. Book 3 and 4 are like book 2. I may just say I really enjoyed that first book and be done with it. So that's it. Those are the series I will probably not ever finish for a variety of reasons. If you think I should definitely keep going with one, let me know. I make no guarantees. If you have a series you're not sure about, let me know. I'd love to give you my input if I've read it. And I hope you have a great day. Bye, friends.